Are we live? Let me know if there's audio. I'm gonna check it real quick. Just in case. Let me see. Yep. There's audio. Excellent. So, just let me see. How many are we? 4? It's fine. We will start the stream almost immediately because the topic is, I'm guessing it's gonna go like about an hour, but maybe more depending on the questions. And let me welcome everyone. Yeah, welcome everyone to the stream. We're just going to start in a minute. The topic, as the title says, or at least suggests, is the enhanced input, which is actually pretty easy. I mean, I could do a simple video like 5 minutes, but what we like to do here in this channel is cover all the fundamentals, all the basics, so you can build on top of it, not just one example and then you need to search another tutorial for another example, right? That doesn't seem to help a lot of developers because they get too constrained in just one example. So the way this stream is gonna go is, because a lot of people have been asking for not only live videos but also more concise ones, like normal tutorials. And can you see the mic there? Perfect. So a lot of people have been asking for the type of right to the point videos, and like we used to do only that. We're doing a lot of more live stuff because we have been seeing the results of the value we can generate when we are interacting with the people in the stream. We believe that it's a good step, but we also don't want to stop making the usual videos, right? So the way I'm gonna do this stream is basically I'm gonna record the video that I'm going to publish later. That's pretty much it. So there will be periods like 5 minutes, 10 minutes where I'll be just focused on the task at hand. I have my trusty notepad, which, well, it's called Obsidian, where I have my topics. What points do I need to touch on? You can see that we'll start with the core concepts. We'll go to easy example from changing the legacy system, which is the normal way, which was the normal way of making inputs in Unreal, to the new enhanced input version. I'll do an example, explain trigger states, another example, explain input triggers, and changing mapping context depending on the context. And the last one, player mappable input config. I don't know if we will get to this in this stream, maybe, hopefully. It should be pretty simple. And the last one will be a little taste of platform settings, just so you know how to do them. I mean, it's not like I could test it in another platform right now, but at least you should be able to get the gist of it and some conclusions, right? So even here I generated a little script with AI. I won't follow it really. I mean, maybe the intro, like, hey everyone, welcome back, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But the important part is the topics that I did write down. I did spend my time. I didn't ask AI to do this. I should, but in this case, like, this is like a too important piece for me to teach in my way, so that's why I needed to write this. So if you have any question, just leave it in the comments. I'll probably go through the topics, and also if I see that I didn't do a good enough job, then I'll just re-explain it, because again, I'm recording the video that will be published later, and this live video also will be published later, because there may be questions that are just as important that I may not be able to put in the final video, like in the condensed version of the enhanced input. So if that sounds interesting to you, great, you're in for a ride. And I'm also excited about it. What time is it? Perfect. Just let me turn on a fan, because the heat is getting intense here. Okay. Okay, so I'll begin with I'll put my notes here. And the way I record the videos, first I'm gonna remove my face. Just the desktop is fine. The way I record is basically, I don't worry too much about the intro, because I rather do the intro after I have done all the lessons or all the chapters. It's a lot easier because I already know what I did. So that way I'm not promising stuff that then I need to commit. It's just, oh, I just did that, now I'll do the intro for this. So I don't need to worry too much about that. So I'll just start with the first part, which as always is creating the project. And yeah, I'll just begin. And I'll take short breaks between parts, unless they are too tight together. Okay, perfect. So I'll start recording now. The first thing we need to do is create a project that we can use with the new enhanced input, which is any project from the 5.1 onwards. In my case, I'll use 5.1. And let's wait for the launcher to load. And I'll pause the video there, so I don't need to edit later. In the Unreal Project browser, let's go to Games, Blank Project, and let's give it a name. I'll also pause it here, because who wants to see me write stuff, right? So, enhanced input tutorial. Oh, let's call it fundamentals or basics. We give it a name, and let's create. Let's click create. And for sure, I'll edit that last part, but yeah, a lot of mistakes, especially when English is not your first language, that sometimes I edit, sometimes I'll just leave it there. Who cares? Now we have the blank project that we can use to start doing stuff with the enhanced input. So that's the first part, just project creation. And I'll check the chat. Great stream, keep it going. Oh, let's see how much of the topics I have in my list can I get to. So always, just as a way of sharing the process of creating tutorials, it's always a good idea to check immediately after you recorded the first part. Check the audio levels, check if you're recording the correct screen. And yeah, so the audio works. I did record the correct screen. The quality should be fine. Oh, let me check the quality actually. Yeah, it's fine. Is what you need. So immediately, I'll just rename it to project creation. And yep, that's pretty much it. Now we can continue recording. Solomon says, nice to see your activity recently. Yes, we have been trying to be a little bit more active. And again, in this stream, what I'm doing is pretty much recording the concise lesson that I can post later. So yeah, let's continue. Let's go to let me see my topics. So we need to touch on the core concepts, which pretty much I will read from here, and then I'll just create whatever I need to, whatever files I need to create. So perfect, let's go back again to the desktop and continue recording. In case you didn't know and you just clicked on this video just by chance, the enhanced input provides a way. I fucked it up. Let me record it again. Oh, it's every time I have a script, this will happen. So, yes, let's just keep pushing. Okay, so to start, what you need to know about the enhanced input is that it provides developers a way of adding advanced input features to their project, like complex input handling or runtime control remapping. We can also add dynamic contextual input mappings when we need. And it's a way to deal with a large number of actions that behave differently depending on the current state of the player. So this system has 4 main concepts, and I'll just create a folder so we can add more stuff. Enhanced input basics. The first one is input actions. You can create an input action by right-clicking, going to input, and input action. If you do not have this for whatever reason, make sure that you're using the Unreal version 5.1 onwards. So let's create an input action. This input action, usually you want to call it input action underscore and the name of the action. Could be crouch, could be fire weapon. Let's just call it fire weapon. Now, an input action is a data asset that represents something that the user can do, like crouch or like firing a weapon. So this is an asset that will represent the action. The next thing you need to know is about input mapping context. Let's create one. Input mapping context. And usually this type of assets, you will find it that they are called input mapping context. And the name of the user or the name of the actual character that will perform the actions. Usually you just call it player, or you can also call it default. I'll just call it player. The input mapping contexts are a collection of input actions that represents a certain context that the player can be in. They describe the rules for what triggers are given input actions, and these mapping contexts can be dynamically added, removed, or prioritized for each user. So we create actions, input actions, and we put them inside input mapping contexts. So if you double click an input action, you will find this information, an action description, if you consume an input, trigger when paused, and more stuff that we will touch later. By later, meaning in a few minutes. And in the input mapping context, you will see these mappings. If you add a mapping, you can select an input action here. And here you can select the actual key you want to bind to this input action. So for now, it's pretty straightforward. You want to shoot with your left click, you search for the mouse, left mouse button. You can also click here and press any key or press the actual mouse, and it can bind pretty easily. Now, you will find these two categories, triggers and modifiers, that are also part of these four main concepts. The first two are input actions. The second one is input mapping context. The third one is input modifier. These are preprocessors that alter the raw input values that Unreal Engine receives before sending them to the input triggers. So these are the modifiers. You can add new modifiers either in the mapping context or in the input action. And let me delete it in the input action. So the way modifier works is that they modify the input that it receives. For example, if I'm going forward with my left thumbstick, probably that thumbstick will give me a value of maybe 1. If we negate that value, it's like multiplying it by -1. So we are modifying the current input so we can get an inverted scheme. So when I press forward in the thumbstick, I'll go backwards. And we will see concrete examples in a minute. I just wanted to let you know that you can modify the information that the inputs give us. We can multiply it, we can negate it, we can smooth it, we can create dead zones, we can do a lot of stuff with the modifiers. Finally, the fourth concept is input triggers. And they determine whether the user input, whether after passing through an optional list of input modifier, which is this one, they determine if the user input should activate the corresponding input action within its input mapping context, which is this one. So what does it mean? I can specify with the triggers what do I mean by firing a weapon. Is firing a weapon means that I need to hold and release the button? Does it mean that I just need to release it? I just need to press it? I need to do a combo action? And we will see also little examples on how to use these triggers. and what does it mean for an input action to get triggered. But this is the core concepts, the main 4 concepts, which is input actions, mapping concepts, mapping context, modifiers for the inputs, and how to define when is my input triggered. And I finish the record. Let's see if there's any comment I'm missing. Everything's fine. So that was the first part, which are the core concepts and how to create the actual assets, right? So let me rename it to 0.2 enhanced input. What did I call it here? Main concepts. Yes, okay. So we have 2 videos down. And now we need to, what's the next step? Changing from legacy system to the enhanced input. There's a question. How do I make it so when I press hold, trigger an event like SMG full auto, and when it's released, it clears the event? Oh, we're gonna touch on that in a minute. Whenever I go through how the trigger states work, we can make a pause and do a little example about that. But it's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. But I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Don't worry. I'll save your question. It says, "Sir, can you answer me a question?" Yeah, sure, if I can, for sure I'll answer. What am I missing here? Oh, what I'm gonna do with this project, because sometimes I mess up the recording and I need to go back to a previous version, is I'm gonna activate source control and I'm gonna use git and just let's initialize, accept the settings. Let's show in Explorer. Let's see if git actually git ignore. Git status. Git that. Oh, it's already committed? Oh, it seems that way. Oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, let me save everything. Input assets. Is there any other question before I continue? Oh, okay. Do game developers make same game for PS4 and PS5 separately, or they just change some settings of PS4 game and it's ready to publish in PS5? When you make a game, usually you make it, especially in Unreal, you make it for PC with PlayStation in mind, which means that you're limiting yourself in terms of resources, which with every new console it stops being true because they are almost like PCs. So in the case of targeting a newer platform, you can just port it. Like, you need to take in consideration the new architecture, because whenever you do a deal with PlayStation for publishing in PlayStation, they will let you download a version of Unreal that works with PlayStation, right? Which is a small part that lets you publish that lets you create builds and executable builds for PlayStation. A lot of stuff can change between consoles, like stuff gets updated, maybe some functionality gets deprecated, which means that they no longer support it, so you can't use it. And that means that you need to basically recheck everything in your game and see if it's following the terms that you have agreed whenever you signed as a PlayStation partner. Because whenever you want to publish, you need to follow the PlayStation Store rules, and there are a lot of rules. Also, your game may break in the transition, which enters a lot of testing, a lot of debugging, and updating all the code. Now, that's the first step, making your old game run in the new platform. The next step will be if you are fine with just porting it as it is. If your graphics are not stylized, I mean, if you went for realistic graphics and you port it from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5, you will see that the competition is a lot higher, right? It's a lot tougher with photorealistic stuff. So you will need to update your graphics, you will need to update the assets. So it's really not just a click if you want to do a good port of the game. If it's a 2D game, it's a lot easier, you don't need really to update that much. If it's a stylized game, also the graphics may not need that much of a revamp. But you may want to use the new tools and that change. For example, if you wanted to migrate from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5, a lot of stuff will change, and it's basically redoing half of the work, even more, I believe. What they say, I saw in some games that character animation is some different. Do they make and record it differently? Sometimes they want to update the character animation. Sometimes it's not fitting of the game anymore, and because a lot of tools appear during development that makes it easier, that's why some studios just decide to revamp everything, the art, the code, the animation. So that's why they just don't just update it as it is. They do want to compete with other games. Okay, so let's continue. For this next part in the enhanced input, what I'm gonna do is actually add a Paragon asset, which it will be the Aurora one. And just so I don't need to record me going through this part, Aurora, Paragon Aurora, and I will add it to this project. Okay, so I'll switch back to the desktop and I'll record the next part of the tutorial, which is changing from the legacy system to the enhanced input, which is something that a lot of our tutorials are suffering from, because we did the tutorials either in the early access version or in the 5.1 version. Or any plan of making AAA game with your team in the future, or just tutorial? For sure, we're making an indie game right now, so make sure to look out for that. But yeah, we won't stop with the tutorials because it's a really fun way to give back to the community, and it also allows us to research new stuff, which is something that you don't really do whenever you're just developing a game. Okay, so let's continue. For this next part, what I want to do is make a comparison between the legacy way of doing inputs and the new way. To do that, we're going to import a character from Paragon, which uses the legacy inputs. So let's go to the Unreal launcher, just click on the marketplace and search for Paragon Aurora. So if you search it here, you can type Aurora. Well, you can type it, maybe I can't. And just select Paragon Aurora and you will see this asset. This asset is free, so I can just add it to my project. Let's search for my project, Enhanced Inputs. Here it is. If your project doesn't show up, you just need to click on Show All Projects and it should appear. So I'll just search for a project. Was it procedural? If your project shows you this error, you can always select a previous version. Now it seems that they have updated it, so enhanced input. Oh, let's see if they updated it. Let's add it to the project. Just put yes, sometimes that message appears and it's, even though we don't have the actual asset. So let's wait. I'll just minimize this. And let's see when it opens. Yeah, here I just paused the video, so we can wait. And it's taking a long time for some reason. Verifying. Okay, it's added. Just so I don't continue, let me check if they updated this. Okay, they didn't. Perfect. I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to do the example because they updated the Paragon asset to use the enhanced inputs. Okay, perfect. I can continue now. Now we see in the folders that a Paragon Aurora folder has been added. Let's click on it, Characters, Heroes, Aurora, and here we will find the actual character blueprint. To use it, I'll just create a new level, a basic one, so it doesn't take as much to load. I'll drag and drop the Aurora character. And here in the details panel, I'm going to search auto possess player, and you can click on general, you can type here auto possess, and in auto possess player, let's select player 0, and let's clean our search. Now, whenever we press play, we will possess this character, which means that we are playing as this character. You will see that we cannot move it around, but we can click to attack. Let's open the character and see why this is happening. So we can right-click the character, edit. We can also browse to the asset and double-click here in the content browser. And let me just close the other assets. And here we have our character. We have this icon because input actions and input axis are not set up. We can click to attack because here we're using the raw input value. So here we have the raw event. And if for some reason here, where's the movement forward, I decided to just connect the W key, it will start working, but that's not the way you usually do stuff. Maybe for debugging or testing, but usually you will find input axis, and for the jump, input actions. Now, the old way of doing this is going to edit, project settings, and in the project settings, which I'm going to enlarge, we go to the input category. Here there's action mappings that are used for specific actions, for example, the jump, and we can create one. Click on the plus button, type jump, and now here we can select the key, which I can click on this button and press spacebar. With this, if I compile, my input action will no longer give me a warning, and when I play the game, you will see that I can still attack, and if I press spacebar, I can jump. Now that is action mappings, which were very useful for actions that are very specific, that you just want to know if you press the key and whenever you released it. So you have here pressed and release. Now, the other mapping that I will need to move my character is the input axis, and the input axis move forward is giving a value. This is especially useful if you have a thumbstick, because a thumbstick will give you a value between -1 and 1. So if you're not doing anything, you get a 0 value. If you press a little bit forward, you can get a 0.2 value. If you go all the way, you get a 1 type of value. So to create that, we can here axis mappings. The new axis mapping will be called move forward. And here we could bind it to the gamepad and bind it to the gamepad left thumbstick Y axis because it's forward and backward. And this would work. But if I needed to use the keyboards, we will need to we don't need to create another axis mapping. We just need to add another key mapping, which is through this plus button. Now here I can select my W key. And if I want to go backwards, I can add another key, select my S key. And here I want to modify the value, because when I go forward, this should be 1. But if I go backward, it should be -1. So I'll just multiply this key. So whenever I press S, we're modifying the input received. this gives me the information that the S key was pressed. If it's 0, it's not pressed. If it's 1, it's pressed. But we are also modifying that value, multiplying it by -1, which is also called negating it. Now this way, if we compile, we see that this is removed. If we play, we will see that if I press S, I'll move forward. If I press W, I move forward, and if I press S, I'll move backwards. So that's the way the old system worked. But this changes a little bit in the new one. Now, what we need to do is pass all these inputs, and I'm going to just minimize this screen just so I have it at hand. I need to create new actions for a new system and replace the old events. So let's start with the jump, which is the easier one. We talked about input actions. Now, an action that we can do is jump. So let's create that. Right click, input action, jump. And I believe the third person example uses jump, so I'm just going to call it character jump. You can just call it jump, but I know that there will be another asset that will be called jump, so that's why I'm just calling it another name. So this is my action. The character jumps. I would just call it jump, by the way, but now this action, I want to determine if it's like an input action that I only want to know if it's pressed or released, or if it is an input axis where I need a value that goes from -1 to 1. The jump is pretty straightforward, so if I double click it, the value type that I will use is digital bool. I only want to know if my if my player pressed the key or not. That's the only thing I want to know. Now I'll create. Oh, let's go. Let's continue with the character jump. Yeah, I'll go to the input mappings and I'll add a new mapping. Here, I need to select the new input action, which is the character jump, and here I will bind my spacebar. Do I need to modify it? No. Do I need to change the way this triggers? We will see. If you needed another key, again, you can add a new key here, and you will get the same options for modification. Maybe I want my gamepad to be able to jump with the face button. So this is the button. Oh, I'll pause the video. My throat is kind of killing me. Oh, a little water. Okay, let's continue. This face button is usually the A button, or it could also be, was it the circle? No, the X button in a PlayStation controller. So this way our character can jump either with the spacebar or by pressing the gamepad. So we have this context where we can fire a weapon and we can jump, but we need to tell our character to be able to use that context. So we need to add that mapping, that input mapping context to this specific character. So let's go to the begin play. Here we don't have anywhere to add it. And usually the mapping contexts are either added to the begin play or to the onPossess. And I don't have it here. We can go to function and search for possessed. And I'll drag it to the top. Possess event. So it's either to the begin play or to the possess event. Begin play because whenever you're playing at the start of the game, maybe your player needs to move, you will add it here. If you don't want to do it that way, whenever we possess this character means that our player controller, which means that our player is going to send inputs to this controller. This happens automatically most of the times. You can also add it here. If you will be using multiple characters, I would add it here. If you are just going to use one, just begin play is fine. And it will also depend on when the player will get to play or not. But in our case, begin play works perfectly. So to add the context, we need to get first the player controller. So we will get the controller. And the controller is a little class that handles the inputs of our player. So if I'm going to control this character, our controller, which I'll try to draw a simple controller, hopefully that looks like a controller, and here are the buttons. Okay, terrible controller. Okay, but you get the gist. The brain of the character will be the inputs that we give them. And if those inputs come from a player, this is called a player controller. Now, this does not represent the actual controller in your hand or the keyboards. This represents the will of the player, the actions that the player wants to take. This doesn't actually represent the hardware. Keep that in mind. Now, for the player to move a character, this player controller needs to possess a character. So when you go up or forward, it tells the actual character to go forward or jump. So a player controller possesses a character, which is actually a pawn, but let's just not get into the specifics of it. And this way, we can make stuff happen. Whenever we press W, the player controller processes it. It looks for any character that it's possessing, and because it's possessing, which if you remember correctly, we are auto-possessing this player. That's why the input happens inside this character. Now we can get the controller inside the character to see who is controlling this character. We want to check if this is a player, so let's cast this to a player controller. Now this player controller has inside it the enhanced input subsystem. So let's search for it. Here it is, enhanced player local subsystem. Again, I believe I pressed enter too fast. Here it is. And from here, just in case, it's a good idea to check if this is valid. So, again, I pressed too fast. Is valid has two flavors. One is a function which returns a boolean. One is this macro. You can use either one of them. by using a branch node, which I just type if and it's immediately give me the branch. Both of these will work the same. So let's just use the macro. And after we check that this enhanced input local player subsystem is valid, it exists in the game, then we can add the mapping context. So from here, from this node, we will drag a new one. Let's type add mapping, and this is the one we are looking for. Add mapping context. So the mapping context, and I'm going to connect it to is valid, is the one that we have created here, where we can jump and we can fire a weapon. So let's select it. Input mapping context player. Now with this done, nothing will happen just yet. But we have determined that this character that is being possessed by my player will be able to use the actions inside this input mapping context, which are actions that we have created previously here. So we need to use those actions now inside this character, and it's a good idea to always comment stuff. I don't really like to comment that much because my perspective on it is that the code should be readable enough for me not to comment. But if you want to add comments, like, it's fine. If you're learning especially and you are forgetting a lot of stuff, it's especially useful to add comments. You just select the nodes you want to comment and press the letter C. And if you didn't understand my accent, I'm referring to this letter. So the C letter, and here we can type adding the player mapping context. There we go. With the input mapping context added, we can start using the actions, which is, I'll put it near the actual action. Input action jump, this is the old way of doing stuff. We right click on a empty space and just search for the name of your input action. In my case, it's called character jump. So I can just call IA underscore, and here it is, character jump. You have the input as an event and you have the value. We will get the value with the event, so I do need the event. So let's click here and you will see that it's a little bit different. Just for it to work, I'm going to remove this. We're going to explain the states in a minute. And I'm going to connect started to the jump. And I'm going to connect completed to the stop jumping. And we can move this here. I'll just copy the text, delete the comment, select this, create the comment, and paste the text here. Let's see if it's working. Can I jump? I can. Now, if I press Shift F1, my mouse will be released. So I can hold Shift, press F1, my mouse is released. And with my mouse, I can move my window so I can see if this, what's happening here, yeah? If this is working. So first click here if this was not selected. Now is the time to select Aurora player character. This is the debug way of selecting which character do I want to see. And now let's go back to the game, click on the game and press spacebar. And you will see how the nodes light up, how the wires are telling me the execution flow of this. And you will see that depending on how you press the spacebar, you get this started always immediately, but the completed action will always release, it will always trigger when we release the key. So I can hold the key and the completed action will not trigger until I just release it. If I release it immediately, then you can see the wires turning on and off, and we'll go into detail why this happens. But what we do know now is that our jump is working correctly, and you have created the first input using the enhanced input system. Holy moly. Okay, so that was, I don't know how much that part, how much did I record? Let me go back to the stream and I will read the questions in a minute. Let me see if the recording went through. There should be a file here. Okay. Oof. I thought I lost this file. 23 minutes. Holy moly. Just to explain. Yeah, 23 minutes. Yeah, okay, maybe I can cut a lot of extra explanation from the pound controllers, or maybe I could leave it in. I don't know. I will see later if I leave it in or not. This will be 3. And I haven't even finished this example. Create. Going from legacy to enhanced jump action. Yeah, maybe I can subdivide this video to be like, oh, overview, and then, oh, let's just start going implementing the jump. Okay, let's read some comments. Let me see. Matthew says, with the enhanced input system, when moving forward with my gamepad, if I add a small amount input with the left thumbstick, my character fully sprints forward. Is there a way to see a more gradual transition from standing still to walk to running? I'm guessing it's to do with the axis values in the character blueprint. The transition itself looks like an anime blueprint, but the value itself goes from 0 to 500. Yes. Okay. Yeah, there's a way of modifying with the where is it, with the modifiers here, to transform the actual input that you want to use. And I will also show how the third person character example does stuff, which sometimes is the way you want to do stuff and sometimes it's not, depending on what you want, really. But yeah, the smooth transition, you can do it in the animations, but yeah, we can add a small amount with the thumbstick, and I'll connect the controller so I can also show it in the tutorial I'm recording. Hell, Simo says, you got a cool accent. Oh, thank you. Some people find it annoying, some people find it not very clear. I mean, in the earlier videos of the channel, yeah, my English was even more broken then, but it's getting there. It's a thing to work on. Ahmed said, Hello, thanks for the tutorials. My question is kind of topic. If you don't want to answer it, I totally understand. I made a character which needs hair and cloth simulation. Can you suggest any doc? I suggest you can look what I did to learn a little bit about cloth and hair simulation. Is the Windwalker example. Is it in the samples or is it where is it? Marketplace, and let me drink a little bit more of water. This one, Windwalker Echo, is a free example, comes with control rig, and also comes with hair and cloth simulation. While I rest my throat, do I have it? Let me see if I have it. But it's called Windwalker Echo. Do I have it? I think I do. While it opens, let me see. There's a spam. Let me just report the user. Unwanted commercial spam. Hide user on the channel and should be hidden the user. Cool, look forward to seeing it and learning more. How can I build Dragon Ball? But one, okay, that question all over the place. Would you go over additive animation or is it beyond the scope of this live stream? For sure it's beyond the scope of this live stream. I haven't done an animation live stream in a bit. Maybe I can. It could be a topic of another one to touch on. Did it open? It didn't open just yet. So this is the Windwalker Echo that also have a lot of cool animations stuff regarding additive stuff. In this example, well, in this sample, the Echo character comes without hair. It does come with the cloth, and the way they do the cloth is they put joints if they wanted to go that way, but they actually painted the cloth with the actual cloth tools inside Unreal, which you just need to open the character, select the slot, and then you can paint the cloth, and you can see the settings that was used here, right? If you click here in cloth config, there will be the configure. Holy shit, my throat. You can see the configurations that they are using for the cloth. And for the hair can be found in two ways. One is the classic way where you rig it. So you have bones, and these bones can modify the hair. And for the ponytail, super simple. You just rig it. And then you just simulate the physics and you have hair physics. The other way they did it is through an Alembic file. So you will have the two options, if I can find it, either by the normal way or through the Alembic files that I really do not have any experience on it, so I can tell you more that you can create them in another project, in another software, and import them to Unreal. But it's a good example to look at. And for the animations, before I forget, I believe they added some here. You have some curves, animations. Do they give you the blueprint? They don't? I thought they do. Or did I create the blueprint myself here? I don't believe so. Oh, here, this is using the Alembic files. Yeah, they give you a blueprint. Yeah, I didn't create this blueprint, for sure. So you can check how they did it. Okay, let's go back to the topic at hand. Okay, perfect. And it seems I'm losing my voice for some reason. So depending on how that goes, I'll need to do a second stream either at the end of the week or next week. But let's see. I'll do some warm up so I can continue. Okay. Now it should be it should be a lot better. And the last question before continuing forward. Hi, what's the best way of implementing a clothing system? I have an idea that I want to work on, but it requires setting up modular outfits, but not much information out there. So that's a big question. I can simplify it for you. I would look at other systems that already work. For example, if you go to the marketplace, and this is another way of doing throat exercises, is just talking and breathing. Here in the marketplace, you will see there's a free pack. Free, and it should be in free, permanently free. There's a modular pack that you can use that I don't remember the name, so I'm searching it. Here it is. A stylized character kit. As you see, you can have different clothing, so it may give you a good idea on how to make the assets for your pack or for your system. And also that you try, you can create a mock-up system for it, right? So yeah, it's always a good idea to check how other people did it, and then try to find your own way that suits your project. Okay, now I'll continue. I won't read until I finish recording this part. I will put the desktop again. And the next part, I needed to finish the the second topic, which is changing the legacy. I don't know why I wrote here that I should start with the camera movement when the jump is actually the easier way to start. So, but I will continue with the camera movement. Or with the movement, maybe. No, with the camera movement. Yeah, the camera movement should be better. So if you are just tuning into this stream, I'm live recording the tutorial that will be about the enhanced input and also answering questions about the enhanced input. This stream is a way of showing you how how the process is gonna work, how the process goes, and if you want the information right now, you can get it. If you want a concise video about it, you will also get it a little bit later. For some reason, it let you like the live stream twice. Oh, that's great. Thanks for the double like then. Okay, let's continue. A little bit more water. Okay. What I don't remember is how did I end the last part, so I do need to check that. Okay, now I can continue from that part because the questions made me forget where did I stop. Okay. Let's go. Okay, let's go. The second input we're going to create is the camera movement. So for the camera movement, we have two inputs, turn and look up. Let's start with the turn. For the turn, we need to create again the action to do the turning. So let's go to input action. Now let's call it input action turn, and I will also create the look up. I'll just first open the turn, and this one is an axis, or at least it says here that it's an axis. So we will need to receive a value between -1 and 1. This will get determined by either the gamepad or by the mouse. So we no longer need just to know if it's pressed or not. We're gonna click here on value type, and we will select axis 1D, which is 1 dimension. Here it says a float, so let's select it. Let's save it, and in the content browser or content drawer, let's duplicate this, and in the Aurora player character, we will see that we also need a look up. So we have created these two input actions. We need to determine now which keys do we want to bind to this action. So in the mapping context, again, I'll select the turn, and here I'll select the lookup. For the turn, I want my mouse in the X axis. So if I'm moving my mouse from left to right, I want my camera to turn. And for the lookup, mouse Y axis. So when we move it up and down, we get the camera movement. If you want to use the gamepad, we can add it. And this will be gamepad, left thumbstick, X, And in the lookup is gamepad left thumbstick Y. So everything thus far is pretty similar. Let's save it. You will see that you can get a little bit of trouble when you have an input modifier that is null. Whenever you have any type of null values, or for example, if you just created a new key and you didn't put anything in it, you will receive this type of warning. You just need to see where the error is. And it's complaining about a null input modifier on one key mapping. The key mapping are these ones. And they were working correctly until I added these two. So let's see if there's a modifier in one of them. Here? Where did I put a modifier then? Here, spacebar modifier. None. This is what is making me not able to save, or it's showing me that error because this is here. So we move that modifier, save it, now it's fine. Now with this created, let's go back to the character and let's change these inputs, and we can delete this input action, and we can close this one. Let's right click and let's call, come on, input axis turn. The one that we created was input action turn, and the other one is input action lookup. And now this is where things get a little bit different, and I'm going to move my enhanced input to the side. So I have a little bit more of space. Here it is. Mouse input. The turn, I need to always know whenever we are pressing the value. So using started won't help me that much. And again, we will go in depth to what each of these states are and how can we manipulate them to our liking. But in my case, I want to use the trigger, because this will get triggered as long as I'm pressing the button. And even if I'm not using it, if it's 0, then it's fine if it's triggering, because we will get a value of 0 and nothing will happen. Now, this is fine, but we need a value. And because we define that our input action turn is an axis, we will get the float value here. So we just need to connect it. We can delete the input axis turn. Input axis lookup, trigger, and connect the action value like this. Now let's see if this is working. Let's save and compile. Let's press play. And now you see that we can move our camera, but there's a little bit of extra movement that I'm not really liking. Now, why is that? I actually don't know, but we will see in a minute. Yeah, something's triggering this. Oh, it was my controller. Let me just turn it off. Yeah, it was my controller adding the input. Okay, so you will see that it's moving with the mouse, and I just noticed that for my controller inputs I messed it up. So let me just fix it real quick. gamepad, oh, the turn should be the right thumbstick X, and in lookup it should be gamepad right thumbstick Y. Okay, so with my controller turned off, I can press play and see that whenever I move the mouse left and right, we're turning our camera. And whenever I move up and down, we are also turning our camera, but only up and down. Now, I don't really like how it moves up and down. I prefer an inverted type of controls. So whenever you move your mouse up, you're actually moving the camera the other way. So this is where we can modify the input. I want to invert this lookup, then I can go to the input mappings, go to lookup mouse, modifiers, and here we can negate this. This will multiply the value by -1, and when we test it again, you will see that whenever you go down, your camera will invert the movement. And for me, this feels a lot better. So that's why I always set it up like this. If you liked the other way of handling it, you can just ignore the modifier and go with it. And I will add also the modifier for the gamepad example, for the gamepad input. And take in consideration that these modifiers and triggers can be added here in the mapping context, but they also can be added in the input action. So I could also negate it here. This depends on what you want. For example, and this is actually a good example that I didn't have written in my notes. The lookup in the mapping context, I'm negating it so I can flip the controls, right? And if I wanted to invert also the controllers for the gamepad, I will need to create the negate again. But if both are gonna have negate, then I can just go to the input action and add the modifier there. Save it. And I can delete this modifier, otherwise I'll negate it twice. Save this and play. And now, whichever key I map to this action, it will always be negated. In this case, that is exactly what I want, but there may be cases where you don't want that. So if you don't want all the keys to be affected by the same modifiers, then you can select the modifiers and triggers individually by each mapped key. And I stopped the recording. There it is. I'll rename this part to this one as jump action. The next one will be move camera. Oh, and this is projected to be a long tutorial actually, if I want to cover all the stuff that I put in the notes. But I'll see if I continue. How long have I been streaming? Hour and a half. Yeah, 2 hours is usually my limit. I remember I did a 4 hour live stream that did not end well. I mean, the live stream went well, but afterwards I was completely exhausted. But let's see how long can I progress. Let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Maybe you could do a tutorial. Good evening, mate. Good evening. Well, here is one just about lunchtime. But if you're ending the day, watching Unreal tutorials is a great way to end your day. Let me see. Yeah, this is fine. Let me see if someone messaged me here. Yeah, okay, let's continue. Let's continue. Let me check my notes. Yeah, I need to do the character movement, which I'll use some modifiers again. Okay, perfect. Let me remove my face then. Go to the desktop and I'll continue. With the camera working, what we need to do is make the character walk again. So our mouse input is working correctly. We no longer need this gamepad input because here we are modifying it by a turn rate, which is a multiplication. But if we wanted to do the exact same thing, we can add a modifier. Turn rate, you see that it has a 45 value, which we are multiplying by the axis value. And in the lookup rate, it has the same number. So in our mapping for our gamepad, we can add that modifier, which is a scalar. And we need to define by how much we want to multiply. So we can just fill everything to 45. So you're finally seeing why the enhanced input is making stuff easier. We don't really need to worry too much about extra logic. We can just put it in the mapping context. And I will do the same for the turn. Again, I'm only modifying it for the gamepad. Modifiers, scalar, and 45 in every, in every space. Okay. So far, so good. We can delete this. And instead of this being called mouse input, we can just call it camera movement input. Now, we were talking about the movement input. And here I will do a little bit of extra stuff because we can do exactly the same and create an input action for the move forward event and for the move right. But we can also, and let me save everything, we can also go to input, create a new input action, call it input action movement, open it. I can close the lookup. And here in the value type, Instead of using the axis 1 dimension, we can use the axis 2 dimension. This is especially useful if you are gonna have input coming from a thumbstick, because the thumbstick or any type of stick has 2 dimensions, either forward, backwards, left, right, and all the diagonals. So the camera movement, we can also do it this way, but I wanted to show you a simple way to do it, the normal way to do it, so you can choose whatever suits you the most. So in this case, for the movement, I'm gonna use the axis 2D. Axis 3D usually is for motion controllers, because you will have up and down, not only front, right, left, and back. You will also have up and down, but in this case I'm not using this. This is usually for VR. Because I'm using a thumbstick, or I may use a thumbstick, I'll use axis 2D. Let's save it. Let's go to the input mapping context and let's add it. Here, where's my movement? Here it is. Now, this movement will be mapped to two values, and not the left mouse button. If I'm using a gamepad, I want that value to be the left thumbstick to the axis. And that's it. And if I'm using the keyboard, I don't remember if this is it, but we will check. But for now, this is it. For the keyboard, let's type W, add another one, type S, add another one, type D, another key, and type A. WSDA or WASD, WASD, whatever you want to call it. That's the keys that we're gonna use to move around. Now, if I leave it like this, every time I press one of these keys, it will give me the value in X positive, which is 1 in X, which should be the right one. But if you're not sure and you don't want to remember all the setup and you want to test stuff, it's a good idea to play around with this type of inputs. So let's see what's happening. In the Aurora player character, let me remove this by adding our new movement. Here I have an action value, which is a vector 2D. I want to split this. So I have the value in X and the value in Y. So far, so good. For the forward, I want to connect this. Whenever this is triggered, I want the value in X to be used. And I can delete this. And also when the input is triggered, I want this move right node, and I want the value in Y. Why am I doing it like this? Well, actually, I don't know. Because in a controller, whenever you go forward and backward, that's the Y value. And whenever you go side to side, that's the X value. So let me change the input actually. X should be for right. So the scale value here will be from X, and the Y value will be for going forward. Yeah, that makes at least more sense to me. Okay, so let's delete this, and we can increase the comment section. So if you want to move forward, use the value in Y. If you want to move side to side, use the value in X. You can interchange this and we can make it work, but for now, you can just leave it like this. Okay, we have connected the input action to the actual movement. If we press play and press W, I'm moving to the right. If I press S, I'm moving to the right. If I press any of the keys, I'm always moving to the right. This means that when I'm using an input action that uses a 2D vector, by default, any key mapped to it will make it move to X positive, which in the case of D, this is correct. It's fine. In the case of A, I just need to negate it. So modify it. Here we are in the A key, modifier, negate. So we go to the other side. If we press play, and I'm going to use the hotkey Alt-P to play it. If I press D, working fine. If I press A, working fine. If I press S or W, it's not working like it should. W should send me a Y coordinate. So we need to switch where does the value of W is sending the input. So we need to modify again the input, modifiers, add an element, and here we will find Swizzle. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but Swizzle input axis values, which says useful to map a one-dimension input onto the y-axis of the 2D action, which is exactly what I need right now. So let's Swizzle it. Go to S, again, Swizzle the values, and negate the value so we can go backwards. Let's save it. Ctrl P, W, going forward, S, going backward, B, going right, and A, going to the left. Now, I will try it with my gamepad. Let me turn it on. And let's see if this setup is fine. Alt-P. You can see that it's moving by itself a little bit. And I'm not pressing anything. If I start moving my left thumbstick, it is moving around. If I move it a little bit to the front, you will see that it's doing this running animation, but slowly, and it really depends on the value I'm giving to my thumbstick. The same will happen if I try to move my thumbstick. It's doing that because remember that we are modifying the turns. I believe we don't really need this scalar for the actual thumbstick. If I remove it and play it, then the thumbstick, oh come on, where is the lookup? Here it is, modifiers. I'll just negate this. Nope, negate. It's fine. Okay, hopefully no more panty shots. Perfect. Yeah. So you will see that I'm getting weird behavior, and it has to do with the actual value of the sticks. Whenever you're using a thumbstick, you need to take in consideration that whenever you release them, not always they will go to the 0 value. they will have a little bit of movement, like 0.001, and that's making my character do that stuff. A way to fix this is for the gamepad, where's the movement here? Gamepad movement is to add a modifier, and we can add a dead zone, which it means that if it's lower than this value, then I don't want to use it. And if it's higher than this value, I also don't want to use it. In this case, the default value is actually fine. You will see that our character will no longer flicker because we're ignoring values that are lower than 0.2. And it should be a good idea to also add that dead zone to the turning. So let's add the modifier dead zone, the lookup, dead zone, and we can stack modifiers, which is actually pretty nice. You usually want the dead zone to be the first one, and then you can modify the values on top. So now we have our character moving correctly. If you wanted to avoid, like, this character doesn't have a walking animation, and you want to avoid this, then you can, here in the mapping context, in the movement, for the gamepad key or mapping, in the modifiers after the dead zone, we can add a scalar again, and we can multiply it by maybe 50. So we always get the full value. Now if we press play, even if I'm putting my thumbstick a little bit forward, it's always moving the full direction, the full motion. It's not letting me walk a little bit because I didn't have the animation for it. Yeah, so that's a good way of implementing the movement and modifying the values to get a better result for your game. Let's go back to the character, and we will see that we have finished implementing this. This reset BR orientation, I don't really need it. Oh, this attack, that I do really need to implement. Let's do it really quickly so we can finish implementing the legacy, porting the legacy inputs to the new one. So here, I'll just change this fire weapon to attack, because they work really the same. Attack. Digital input is fine. Movement, I can close it. And the attack is left button. And also, for the gamepad, this will be, what did they map that? Face button left. So again, oh, I have my gamepad connected, so I can just press it. Face button left. This is fine. We have already done this, so that's why I'm just speeding through it. Attack. And here, because I just want to know if it's pressed or released, here in pressed, go to started. You can drag and the pins that way. If you go, hover the pin, press shift, hold shift, and click on it, and you can hold it. And you can, you can duplicate the pin connection like this. If you hold shift, if you hold alt, you can remove it. And if you hold control, you can move it around. I should do a tip on that. Maybe a short could be good, but yeah. Now we can build this, because I just wanted this start. And now everything should be working, my attacks, my jump, my camera movement, and my overall movement. Perfect. Okay, I'll stop recording and go back to the stream. I'll save everything here actually. Save all. I'll save the map here. Test map. And I'll commit everything to source control. Just so I have a checkpoint that I can go and let me go here. From legacy to enhanced input. Well, hopefully that commits. Okay, let's see the chat. Honestly, all this should just be something you can just activate with one click in the engine, since locomotion is a basic function in 3D games. I mean, it's getting better, but when it gets better, usually you want to do more complex stuff, so the system actually provides a way of doing complex stuff. Oh, it's still adding. Oh, it's a lot of stuff. Oh, okay. So let's take a little break. And let me see if I'm going to end the stream before starting the next section. Oh, I do need to rename the 05. Whoops. This one is move character movement. And this should not be 0.4, this is 5. So let's see. So far we have how many? Oh man, 38 minutes of tutorial. Yeah, for people that wanted a deep dive on the enhanced input, you got it. You really got it. So the next topic, let me check my notes, is to examine the existing example, which should be very fast. Yeah, it should be very fast. It's just a review, should take me like 3 minutes, so I'll just record it now. Then we will go to trigger states, and that may take a little bit more. Yeah, how much? Oh, it's still not 2 hours. Okay, so let's keep pushing. As soon as I'm hungry, I'm sorry guys, I'm done. This is the end of the stream, but for now, I'm not feeling the hunger. I'm in the zone, so let's just continue. Oh, let me remove my face and Let me record. Oh, it says, did you do the event timer with enhanced input yet? Event timer, not yet. No, not yet. Yeah, while I record this part, maybe you can elaborate on what you mean by event timer. Is there a trigger? Or, yeah, if you have any examples that you will want to see, you can leave it in the comment also. It will be a good idea to check them out. Okay, I'll continue. Now that you know how the enhanced input works, it's a good idea to check the third-person example, because they do things a little bit different. Let's go to the content drawer, add feature or content pack, and here you will have the third-person example. Yep, so Blueprint or simply C++ if you are using it. Third-person example, Blueprint, and add it to the project. Let's wait a little bit. And here's when I pause the video, because I never know how much these adding files to source control can take. Now that it's added, let's go to the content drawer, and it should be in third-person Blueprint's third-person character. You will see that this sample character is doing the same thing. We add the input mapping, we have input actions. In this case, they did the camera input in the same one. They just call it look. Movement input in the same input action, jump, and that's it. I was telling you that it was a little bit different because here the X is what they consider to be, I believe, left and right and forward, backward. Yeah, I believe it's the same. It's the same setup. And in terms of inputs, you will have your actions, which are the same. And you will have the inputs for mobile devices, which is just touching. Inputs for the arrow keys. Gamepad adds the modifier dead zone and scalar. Oh, it did the same thing. They didn't multiply this because it's not needed, because the left thumbstick will only give you X and Y. And in the look, instead of using mouse X and mouse Y, you can use the mouse X, Y to the axis to get the same functionality. And here you have a negation, so you can invert the scheme. So yeah, the negate probably only negates one axis, the Y axis. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's the same setup. It has its differences, but the overall implementation is the same. So let's close it. You are no longer a stranger to the enhanced input system, and you will see that a lot of examples are still using the legacy system, and now you can port them to the new one. That especially rings true for our tutorials that were done with previous versions. So if you are asking for the enhanced inputs in those tutorials, in those old tutorials, I will redirect you to this video. Yeah, and that's the little review I wanted to do with the example, the third-person example. Let me go to captures 0.6. Third person character sample review. Okay, what did Cyborg say? So it's an event timer for line tracers which simulates an SMG when you hold primary action, and when you release the primary action you will clear the event. It simulates a full auto SMG, I mean. Okay, I can do an example on that. Yeah, I believe it could be nice. Yeah, and I could add it to this tutorial. Okay, perfect. It's perfect. I will now do stuff with the trigger states. Yeah, I will do stuff with the trigger states, and I can use that as an example. Without the tracing. The tracing I can add it later, right? So I could just do a forward trace and that's it. Yeah, let me see. Input triggers. Okay, state triggers. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Okay, let me go back to the desktop and to record. Now that you know how to create the inputs, it's a good idea to go a little bit in depth. Remember I told you that we were going to go a little bit more into what these states mean? Well, these are trigger states. A trigger state represents the current state of the action. So to show it better, I'm gonna press play. I'm gonna go to the enter command text box, and here let's type show debug space and enhanced input. This will let me, and I'll press enter, this will let me see the actual values of our enhanced input. So for example, if I'm moving forward, whoops, let me click actually on the game so we have control of our character. You will see that whenever I'm pressing a button, stuff is happening at the left side. Now, for example, if I press W here, I'm seeing the action that is being activated, that is being used. In this case, is green, so it means it has been triggered. A triggered action means that it has completed the evaluation of all trigger requirements and it's been triggered. For example, if I have a press and release trigger, then the trigger is sent when the user releases the key. And let's do an example of that. So you see here that the movement is triggered, and you can see the key that triggered the movement, which is the W. For the attack, we have a click. Let's go back to the player, attack, left mouse button, and let's modify this trigger. Let's say that this will be a press and release, hold and release. And this hold and release, and we will go into more detail about each one of these ones, but let's for this one, it's pretty easy to know what you should do. Hold and release, hold time threshold means how much time do I need to hold the key. So let's say 2 seconds. The actuation threshold means if the input needs to be above this value. If it's a key, it will always be from 0. It will be always 0 or 1. If it's a thumbstick, it may be from 0 to 1 or -1 to 0. So you can modify this actuation threshold. There it is. Or at least half of the word. So you can choose this threshold based on this value. And affected by time dilation means if you are modifying how fast or how slow the game is running, you can select if it's affected by it or if it isn't. So these 2 seconds could be longer or shorter depending on how fast your game is going. So we have this attack. We have changed the trigger to hold and release. Let's save it. Let's go back to the test map and let's activate again the show debug enhanced input. If you click on the text box and you press the arrow key, the up arrow key, you will see the last commands that you did. So we can just press that, enter, and now we have it. So for the attack, if I press my left click, you now will see that the action is no longer green, is yellow. So right now it has a ongoing state, but before entering ongoing, it has entered a started. And if you can't see it, some people like to see my horrible handwriting. Oh, is this not working? Oh, I'll draw it with the mouse then. Started. Before entering ongoing, the started state happens. So it happens whenever the trigger, which is the hold and release, begins the evaluation. So whenever I press the button, the started state happens. Now, because we need to hold the button for 2 seconds, we are not triggering this event, this action. We are still evaluating if this action can be triggered. So it's ongoing. When the trigger is still being processed, for example, in this press and hold action, it will be ongoing while the user is holding down the button before the duration that we specified before is reached. Now, depending on the triggers, this event will fire every tick while the action is evaluated once it receives the input value. So we can see it now in real time. I press the button, ongoing. Whenever I reach that 2 seconds, it's still ongoing because our trigger event is hold and release. But now I have pressed, I have hold the key more than 2 seconds. So when I release it, it will get triggered and it will be very fast. But you should see a little bit of green. Did you saw it? You didn't saw it? Okay, I can change the hold and release to just hold, and I will hold it for 3 seconds. Let's save it. Go to my map and press play. Oh, I need to shift F1, up arrow key, enter, and now I should be able to see it. I press, now it's ongoing, and when it reaches the the threshold of 3 seconds, now it's triggered. So how does this look for my character? Now, you will see that my character was always attacking is because I was using the started event, and every input action, whenever it starts looking if it's going to be triggered or not, it always triggers this started state. So if you wanted to look how the pins actually looks like, I will show you. Trigger. Started. Ongoing. For now, we haven't talked about canceled yet. So let's press this here. And whenever I press my attack, it starts. Right now it's ongoing, and now it's triggered. And it's firing every tick until I just released my mouse. Now, the cancel and the complete event are kind of similar. The complete triggers, you enter the complete state. Let me rephrase that. You enter the complete state when the trigger evaluation process is completed. And you enter the canceled state when the triggering was cancelled. For example, a user lets go of a button before the press and hold action was triggered. So let's test that. Let's connect this to cancelled and connect this to completed. So we need to hold for 3 seconds. So I'm holding it, we're ongoing. Triggered means that I have fulfilled the 3 seconds, but I have not released the key yet. When I release it, it should print completed, and it does. If I'm holding it again and release it before we complete it, then we go to the cancel state. And that's how the trigger states work. And we can do a lot of stuff with these trigger states. Let me just remove everything here. Connect back the started. Compile and save. And in the attack, I'll just remove the trigger that I added here. Just to have everything clean. Save all. And let's continue. Whoops. Okay, so now that I have explained the trigger states, now we can start making some examples. Which the first one is going to be the suggested one. Obviously, if you're part of the stream, of course we want to take your opinion in consideration. So let's create a quick one. And if it's easy enough, I'll put it in the tutorial. First, just let me rename this so I don't lose the file. Third person character. This part was trigger states. Yeah, trigger states. Yeah, trigger states fine. Okay. Okay, the SMG. So you want to hold the primary action, and when you release the primary action, you clear the event. Pretty simple. You just need to create your action, which input. Oh, and let me just remove my face for this. I'm not gonna record it just yet, but oh, and let me also add everything. Ah, come on. Yeah. Git status, git add all, git commit. Finish topic 6. Okay, so while that's been added, we can do the example. So again, pretty simple. Input action. This will be fire the gun or primary action, however you want to call it. You wanted to call it primary action, we can call it primary action. Digital bool is fine, we just want to know if it's pressed or released. In the mapping, I'll connect it. I'll assign it my right click because my attack is already using that left click. And by default, this primary action, and I'll add it here. Let's go here. And again, show the inputs. You will see that the primary action, whenever I'm pressing it, gets triggered. Whenever I release it, it finishes, right? So there's no ongoing, which is fine because every time it gets triggered, I want to shoot the gun, right? Like an SMG. So what we can do here in the primary, here in the mapping context, we can trigger it as a pulse. And here we can select the interval. Let's say you are firing 0.5 times a second. You can select if you fire at the start of the trigger limit, 0, I believe it's no limit, perfect. Affected by time dilation, okay, this is fine. Now let's see again our debug. Here is the primary action. I right click, and right now nothing is happening. Or it seems like nothing is happening, but it's actually changing from ongoing to true. And we can see it if whenever we in triggered put something like hello. Every 0.5 seconds we are printing hello. And when we release it, we stop doing it. So here we can add a line trace. Yeah, line trace by channels could be nice. And it will be a super simple line trace. You should get your gun position and everything, but here, let me put the mesh. Let's just get the character location, the actor location. Get actor location. That's the start. Let's add a vector in the forward direction. Get forward actor forward vector, multiply by the distance or the range that we want to have. And let's convert this pin to float. This will be the range of our weapon. Maybe you want 2000 centimeters. And connect it like this. Visibility is fine. And I'll put it for duration, and I'll make it a 0.2 duration. Let's press play. And now every time I'm shooting, you will see that here is the line trace. Hopefully you can see it. You want to shoot faster. Okay, let's go to the triggering 0.1. Now it's shooting every 0.1, and I would need to remove the 0.2. I'll put, instead of the interval 0.1, I'll put 0.3. So we can see that the trace is disappearing. Yeah, now you should see it blinking. And that's how you can create like a simple SMG type of action. Now, you will want to probably, I don't know, you will want to tweak this, maybe create different input action for different weapons. And this also could be modified depending on the weapon stats and everything. But that is a more complex example that I can't cover right now. Yeah, there's no need for a timer. There's actually no need for the timer. Yeah, I mean, you can handle it in the input, the shooting, or you can handle it in the class. If you want to handle it in the class, then for sure you need a fire custom event, fire weapon. And when you trigger the first time, and this is the old way of doing stuff, right? The old way is just, oh, this is none. I just want this to be here, firing the weapon. When you start, we create an event, timer. Set timer by event. Our event is called fire weapon. So here I'll create event, select our fire weapon, the time, which it would be the fire rate, 3. This will let you have more customization, right? If you will always have the same weapon, then for sure I would just do it in the inputs. If you want to change this time, it's easier done here, and this will be looping. So now this fire weapon will loop indefinitely, but we want to stop it. So we promote this to a variable, timer ref. And whenever this input is completed or cancelled, but by default, it will be completed if you are not changing the triggers. Here you just clear and invalidate the handle. And that's pretty much it. Let me put it to 0.5, and you will see that you have this variable to modify. So that's an added bonus, and it should work the same way. While I'm holding, I'm triggering, I'm firing the weapon. If I remove it, we completely clear the timer, so we stop doing this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, here you will see that it's taking the first time to shoot 0.5. You can easily fix it by just adding here fire weapon once and then setting a timer to it, or doing it the other way, firing weapon and setting the timer here. I wouldn't recommend this because you will be setting the same timer a lot of stuff, so I'll usually just do this and then it will work immediately. Yep. Yeah, that's how you can handle any type of weapon. Now the next part that I wanted to record, and let me just delete everything extra that I created. That shouldn't crash my engine, hopefully. Okay, perfect. Let's see that everything's working correctly. Yeah. Okay. What was it that I needed to record? I forgot. Oh, 2 hours and a half. Yeah, so the next part I was going to record, but for sure I have gone long enough, is go through every input trigger. And I can do this the next stream. I'll just call it part 1 and be done with it. Yeah, it will be too much to try to finish it right now. Yeah, so hopefully you have enjoyed the stream. This last part, I'll see when will I stream again, and it will be dealing with extra behavior, but at least the basics you already have them. You can already start playing around with the inputs. You can play around with the triggers, modifiers. Should be pretty simple actually. There are only like maybe 2 or 1 weird case whenever you are using combos here, combos and corded action, but I will deal with that in the next stream. Yeah, so having said that, hopefully you enjoyed the stream, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Take care, guys and gals, and have a good one.